In this video, we are going to be upgrading this Axial Bomber, our Bomber giveaway vehicle, with some universal axles, axle tubes, and then links from Incision, all to strengthen the bottom of this vehicle. If you're new to the channel, my name is Troy and this is Roadside RC. You'll find bashing and crawling and drifting and racing, plus product review videos and how-tos, and a Bomber giveaway build series is what we're working on here. And today, working on the strength, let's get in by tearing this front axle all apart. The first part of this upgrade is these universal axles. This truck comes with a dog bone style from the factory, which really limits your total steering angle. You can see here that is binding there and it does not turn any further. So we are going to take these axles apart, get them out of there, slide these in. While we're there, we are going to install these simple aluminum axle tubes inside there. They don't really add a lot of weight, but what they do is keep this whole axle from flexing and breaking. I have broken some of these before. These are very cheap parts in order to upgrade it and make sure that it doesn't break on you. You'll want to pay attention to how this C-hub here is clocked, because it is actually, you can actually change the angle that it's on. You can see mine's cocked back fairly far. It's all the way in the rearmost position. It changes the steering angles that you have depending on how you put it on there. This axle doesn't come out because you have to loosen these bolts up and take them out first. With this out, you can actually see the old part here versus the new part and what we're gaining. So you're gaining, not only does it appear you have a thicker shaft, so you're less likely to break the drive shaft as it is, the thickness out here on the end, you can break this edge off right here while you're crawling. That all is there, plus we're gaining, like we said, a much greater steering angle and less binding with this system. Make sure you move this bearing over as you do it. As a reminder, this is a 2-for-1 modification here. So we take this screw out of the top right here, just a small screw that helps hold this axle truss in. And then you very carefully line this up. This screw, the screw hole here, is where that will then go down in. You see the notch on either side here is where these two screws will go around it. And then this location is where the top and bottom C-hub screws go in. So you need to be very precise as you put this in. Once you get it in there, it's kind of hard to get it back out. So you want to be very careful as you slide it in. Be careful when you put your C-hub back on. The longer part does go on the bottom. It is not symmetrical top and bottom. This side's all back together. The other side over here is the exact same process. You'll just find everything's a little bit shorter on this side. Moving on to these Incision links, it does not come with any kind of instructions or anything like that. It comes with a whole bunch of ball ends, couple screws, couple longer bent ends, a 200mm ruler on the back here. So we know that this part's going to go on the front, and that's going to help us with a lot of strength and stability there. So we're going to have to take this apart, and we're just going to kind of have to figure it out as we go. But yes, this is definitely one of the problems that we have with this system, is that you can literally point the front tires at each other and that just bends. And part of it's like, okay, well, it works as a nice servo saver. You're never going to fry your servo that way. But when you're getting crawling and all of a sudden your front tires are pointing at each other, it's really, really annoying. This is just this old axial design where they just made this stuff out of spaghetti. It's just ridiculous. So we have to end up spending a whole bunch more money upgrading the parts, and that's what we're going to start with, this part right here. Confirming again, clearly no instructions in here, but what I did is I just paired up these rods, so you can see that these are slightly bent, these have an S-curve to them, slightly bent but longer. It comes to this, must be our other steering link here. Now we need to dig in and find all these. Are these all the same? They look like some of them in here are different. We're gonna have to look at that. I was wrong, these do look like they're all the same, so that's gonna make our life a little bit easier. what I'm going to do, shock pliers, they really do come in handy. I do suggest that you get some. We're going to pop these balls into these rod ends with the shock pliers, and then we're going to start assembling and trying to make sure that these are the same length as what we have here. For this linkage right here, screwing in the front all the way matches up just perfectly. It ends up being the exact same length. For this upper rod, it's obviously not going to connect in here anymore. It goes all the way to here, so you have to match that total length. I found I had to unscrew both of these a couple rounds in order to get it the right length. So now we just bolt it right back on place. Like, here's what we look like installed. So you can see this top rod coming through, using the supplied hardware from the kit to just go from the top here through this rod and then putting the nut on the bottom. And now we get nice steering angle. We actually max all the way out with this turnbuckle hitting the knuckle over here. We could actually get more steering angle this other way if we clearanced that a little bit. So I am considering coming in there with a Dremel and clearancing that out. We actually have a little bit of room here because of the curve in this link over here. So we could actually gain even more steering angle if we want with this. But now what we've done is we've strengthened this whole front end. I do need to check the toe though. Even though I did line this up with this one, it does look like we're towed in a little bit. So the front of the tire is in farther than the rear of the tires. Not how we'd want it. Not very good for crawling that way. If anything, just a slight toe out. So once I get the tires on, I'll have to measure that. But it looks like a little bit towed in. All I have to do is take off one of these rod ends, loosen this up a little bit, and widen that whole thing out. With that part done, we're now changing our focus to these front links, and this is what you get here. Look at that. I mean, these things, they're literally made out of spaghetti. I have no idea why Axial never changed that design, that spec, because it's atrocious, man. Like, it's just bad. Like, you get up against something and all of a sudden your whole axle flexes over and you can't pull up on it because your axle just flexes instead of the car driving. Like, it really is. It's pretty silly, if I'm honest with you. But pretty simple for us. Same thing here. We're going to gain a little bit of clearance. You can see even the small amount that I've driven this car, there's some rock scrapes all over these front axle, links already. So by putting in these bent links, we actually gain that kind of clearance. As you can see there, if I can get my hand out of the way, you can see the kind of clearance you gain by those bent links being in there. Really quite a nice feature for the car. So all we have to do is screw here, screw that comes in through here, and then once it's out, again, just like we did for the other side, we're going to make sure that it's the same length as we put it back on. If you've never worked on one before, this is sneaky. 1.5 millimeter screw wrench goes right in this hole, and there is like a grub screw in there that's going through that link. Easy to not know what the heck to do if you've never done it before. The full front and rear, it's all done. All the parts are now on it, but I'm not liking something I'm seeing here. So on the rear, everything looks great. The axle is nice and vertical still. Any kind of flex, there's no binding, no nothing. On the front, you notice how far forward this axle is now kicked, right? So it is leaned way up. And as I flex, the drive shaft interferes with that top control arm just a little bit there. So what I'm going to do is I actually wonder if these two control arms aren't actually swapped, if they're actually in the wrong spots. Should this more S-curve one be on the lower side? Should the more gentle curve one be on the top? So I'm going to take them off, especially on this side with the drive shaft, and I'm going to swap it and see what that feels like. Now this is much better. Much more better articulation. It's not binding on that drive shaft at all. So curved bars go on the top side, S bars go on the bottom. Hey, if there were instructions, we would have known this kind of thing, but we don't, so we just had to trial and error it. The last thing we're looking at here today with this Bomber is we're looking at the ride height. Thing really does sit quite high in the air, which makes it tippy, right? It makes it ability to tip over a lot easier. We saw that on the first drive. It really wanted to roll over easy. It's going to roll over to the side. It's going to roll over backwards the higher you have your vehicle. I'm really thinking I want to get it down a little bit. One, it's going to look so much meaner, but then two, it's actually going to crawl better. So we're going to do this the free and cheap way. On the rear, the Bomber actually provides you with another set of holes, both top and bottom, to put a whole second set of shocks if you want. I'm just going to look at moving these back and seeing what that does. On the front, there's not nearly as much adjustment. You have a little bit of flex up at the top, but I'm going to try to look at moving this front shock to this position, seeing if that helps me at all. On the rear, it's a 1.5 millimeter set screw that holds the top shock position in. And it looks like it's a 2 millimeter with a nut on the back side for the bottom. So, well, that worked just about perfectly. Actually, it's going to be funny. I think it might have even lowered it too much. So we're going to have to see once we get the tires back on it and really look at it. But it definitely did the job there. On the front, we definitely have a lot less that we can work with here. There's one hole rearward that you can move the top shock mount. That's not really going to do a whole lot, really. Down here on the bottom, this is lower versus this mount, but this will also help us angle the shock back a little bit, which will act as if the shock is softer. So we're going to move this back. We're going to move the shock up to this upper position here. Then we're also going to probably decrease the preload on the shock all the way up to the top. This truck has really turned out quite good, man. I'm really happy with this. This lowering it down, still very comfortable, still plenty of flex for any kind of flex that we need for crawling, right? But you don't need too much. And just because you've lowered a crawler does not mean that you've really impacted its flex. And so this is looking really good, really happy with it. And you should be too, because if you remember, this is the Bomber giveaway build. So I have maybe 1 or 2 more videos to do with this thing for building it out, and then it is going to be time to give it away. So you need to stay tuned, click that subscribe button, hit that notification, turn it on, and we will see you in that next Bomber build video. Thank you, and goodbye.